Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce's Ukraine War news update. First part thereof for the 7th of May 2024. Let's get straight to it. We go to the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. You can find those caveats in the description to the video below. We are well above 1,000 for the lost personnel for the day before. The Russians losing 1,160 personnel, wounded or dead. That's going to be seriously wounded. That is a really significant number. We have seen numbers over 1,000 for, I think, 9 out of the last 10 days, I believe, something like that. So it's been a very difficult time for the Russians in terms of loss of personnel, but they are, of course, making those gains on the front line. 25 tanks is a phenomenal number, really high number of tanks to have lost. That's a massive uptick from previous days. 14 APVs is actually slightly below average armored personnel vehicles, and 37 artillery systems is a high number in that category as well. 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, 32 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 9 pieces of special equipment. So I think that is a really testing day for the Russians again. That those sort of days are very consistently being seen at the moment. We've not got an Andrew Perpetua list of losses out yet today, so I'll have to bring you two probably for tomorrow. As we've seen last couple of days, his stats have been on a kind of parity. Russia with Ukraine losing about the same amount of kit, which is not ideal for Ukraine. But on the Ukrainian general staff figures, the Russians have had a testing couple of weeks, really. Then when we go to look at certain losses and things that are going on, this is interesting. This is footage from a Russian Ka-29 helicopter over the Black Sea, firing at a Ukrainian naval drone carrying R-73 air-to-air missiles. Eventually, it's destroyed. So we talked about this yesterday, how these Magura V5 drones are supposedly carrying air-to-air missiles launched from, obviously, I would say ground attack, but no, it's actually sea attack. These won't have huge amounts of range. When they're fired from the ground, they have to overcome gravity, and they use up a lot of their, I think, fuel and rocket propulsion and whatnot. When they're fired in air-to-air mode, you're using the speedy aircraft. They have a much longer range. These might only have the range of kind of short range air defense systems, but still useful. Now, I was thinking about the kind of physics of this, about how the helicopter has the advantage here, because I don't know how these drones will operate in terms of being able to see around them from up top. Obviously, you can see out the front. We often see that footage of these drones sailing or shooting towards a ship. But what's their awareness like out there? And also, how quickly can they turn? A helicopter here has a real advantage if it comes in behind a drone like this. So you'd want these drones to be operating in pairs and have really good peripheral kind of awareness and vision. But this is the footage that we've seen of this drone getting taken out. And sort of can get around the side of it. This drone does have a missile on board, but I don't know what fix it kind of needs on the target, especially if it can't really see it moving forward. So it would be interesting to see how these end up being used or adapted so that they become more effective. Obviously, this drone is not long for the world, as a helicopter is just getting lots of shots on it, and it eventually takes it out. We'll see. Yeah, there it goes. As it, cuts to it being disabled, and then the helicopter just gets to take pot shots at it. And that's the end of that drone. So, yeah, it's good that the Ukrainians have got this capability, and that's it exploding. But it's going to be interesting to see how they use them effectively. Obviously, the other question I had is whether this drone is also packed with explosives. Is this just going around the Black Sea looking for an aerial target to hit, or is it packed with explosives and has that missile on board in order to protect itself as it goes towards a naval ship target? So who knows? I reported this yesterday in a breaking news video that today the best crew of the best died. Russians whine about the loss of the Su-34 fighter bomber with its crew. It was from such size that the Russian launched FABs across Ukraine. So this is confirmed, or at least the information appears to be that it was shot down outside. Russians claim an engine failure. I suspect it was shot down in Belgorod, which is north of Kharkiv. If it was shot down there, then that's really significant because it means that Ukrainians have got some air defenses and their interceptors, i.e. the missiles that they shoot, locked and loaded, and are able to take down Russian airframes that are approaching the border. That means, and dropping these horrific guided glide bombs that are having such an effect on the Ukrainians. If the Ukrainians do have those air defense systems in place at those kind of locations, then this will change the behavior of these aircraft inside Belgorod, and we might see a downtick in aviation strikes on the northern borders. Or if it was indeed some kind of technical malfunction, then the Russians will continue to operate as they were. Interestingly, I'm not hearing of any, we'll come to this in a second, any strikes on Ukraine or Ukrainian strikes on Russia last night. It was a really quiet night. I don't know if this has anything to do with it. There were 2 planes lost in the last week. Now, we also saw yesterday that the Ukrainians took out a fast attack boat in Chornomorska on Crimea, and I was wondering whether it was worth the drone doing that, whether this was the target it was looking for, or whether it just opted for this because there are no other targets it could find. It's difficult to know. But rather than just being a rigid inflatable boat, actually this could well be a much more significant target, or a little bit more of a significant target. So the Ukrainian Review here reports from Andriy Yusov from the GUR that this was, quote, it's a really successful operation. The cost of the boat is $1.3 million, depending on the equipment and modification. So this could well be the sort of boat that was taken out, or the boat that was, as he says, it depends on what equipment is inside it. But that's arguably a fairly decent target for the Ukrainians here, and it might well have been worthwhile in the end. I guess there are also other metrics to measure the success of such operations. They are going to be gathering intelligence about what they can see around. They're going to be gathering intelligence on the defenses, like the booms and whatnot, protecting these ports. They're going to be also hitting the Russian morale, making the Russians think, oh my goodness, these drones can get through our defenses. It's going to be getting the Russians to spend more time and resources on defending their ports and naval infrastructure. So even though that drone might have taken out something that wasn't crazy high value, like say a frigate or something, there's still lots of other ways to measure the value of such an attack. And lots of footage coming out about this and conversations on these. We'll move on though. We have seen, here is a piece of footage. I almost showed you this yesterday and I decided to show it today. It's of a BMP that is driving through the fields on a way to attack the Ukrainians and just fundamentally catastrophically disassembles after driving over a mine. And all the personnel inside would almost certainly have perished with that. Now, okay, bully for whoever is involved in that. What does that mean? I just find it interesting that a single BMP full of troops is charging at the Ukrainian lines here. What does that tell me? It tells me that I think the Russians are operating at a suboptimal level, where on quite a few occasions you just see a single infantry fighting vehicle pummeling towards, absolutely careening towards the Ukrainian lines through minefields on its own. without any other kind of support. And you think, is that the best way to attack Ukrainian trenches or positions? Like, really? Is that what you'd expect if you're in an optimal state as an army? And I think this tells you possibly quite a bit. So we talk about how the Ukrainians are really on their knees at the moment, but there's nothing that tells me that the Russians are in a good state either. And that's why I think they're both on their knees. It's just that it's relative. So as they both get attrited down to this level, and the Russians are still, well, it was like this at the beginning of the war. It goes down, 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 and they're like this now. So these guys are really on their knees, but these guys are really on their knees compared to where they were, and you still got the same differential. And I think it's two sides of the square. We're exactly where we were two years ago. Ukrainians are ceding some territory, but they did that 2 years ago. Then they took a load back. We'll see whether they'll be in a position to do anything like that again, because it's all down, in my opinion, to sitting back for a year, attriting the Russians from a distance, and then using that time to mobilize and mobilize and mobilize. We'll see if that happens. Right. Moving on, we have Smolensk brick factories caught fire, Russia on fire. It's a fairly substantial fire, that. I don't know if it's got anything to do with the war, but it's 1,500 square meters of fire. Local residents saw 2 explosions before the fire, though, so it could have been a strike yesterday. I don't know, or some partisan activity. I just don't know. And then this is the only thing that I've seen from overnight. Well, it's this morning. Belgorod region electrical substation used by the Russian occupiers has been hit. There you can see a drone taking out, a spotter drone there, and another drone, and that is, I think, going to be a real thorn in the side for the Russians around the border regions, as the Ukrainians are able to make drones that have a longer range or can extend their range by having them get dropped off by a mothership drone, like a sort of Baba Yaga octocopter drone. If you can hit any substation within 30 kilometers, maybe 20 kilometers of the border, then actually the Russians are going to have a bit of a nightmare, because the Ukrainian drone operators seem to be pretty darned useful. Right, moving on to strikes, hits and strikes and whatnot. There is very little to report. As I say, an incredibly quiet night last night. But I think this is worth discussing. So Russia is no longer using the Crimean Bridge to supply weapons on to the front. It is no longer an important military target for the Ukrainians, according to the Independent newspaper, UK media outlet. I say newspaper, it's only in digital form now. Analysis of satellite imagery shows that the volume of military cargo trains passing over the bridge's rail line has dropped significantly over the past 3 months. Instead, Moscow has switched to using overland routes in Ukraine's controlled east and south to supply its troops at the front, the publication said. It might not be worth trying to spend an awful lot of time and resources, expensive missiles, and you'd have to use a lot of them, and you would possibly lose a lot of them to air defences around the bridge, which will be incredibly well defended. I don't think it's a target that's worth hitting. And as it says here, analysis of the bridge and the traffic over it shows that they really aren't using it that much for military cargo. We have heard that actually they can't have too much weight on the bridge still, even though it's been sort of fixed and whatnot from the previous attack on it. And so that's why they are, one presumes, going full tilt with building that alternative rail system, going from Rostov-on-Don through Taganrog, through sort of Mariupol, Berdyansk and whatnot. They're going to be using that, and that is the alternative to this. Just worth considering. We might not see a big strike on the Crimean Bridge that a lot of people have been expecting for a long time because of that. Okay, Putin's inauguration is taking place, I think, as we speak. As I'm recording this, he's possibly still talking. Might be over now, actually. His inauguration 2000 and 2024. There you go. 2 different Putins there by the looks of it, isn't it? Maybe not. I don't know. You tell me. It certainly doesn't look like the top one is our present Putin. I think the early Putin, this Putin is one of the most different Putins. When I see all the different Putins together, and I've shown you, images of that before, it does strike me that that this iteration is definitely a different one, but those rumours will persist, no doubt. So he's being inaugurated, and a number of typically obvious attendees are there. Hungary, Slovakia, Malta and Cyprus. A lot of cargo and money goes through both Malta and Cyprus, as well as Greece. So the Russian Shadow Fleet has a lot to do with the Greek fleet. There's a lot of Greek cargo ships that suddenly became not Greek cargo ships in 2022 after the sanctions were put in place. So that could be why Greece is there. And then the kind of outliers, France, they have sent a diplomat there. I think they initially weren't going to, so I don't know what's going on with their rationale there. But it's interesting that the rest of the EU were like, no, ain't going to happen. So, yeah, interesting that the French are there in some diplomatic form. And interestingly as well, we've got Steven Seagal is a doorman. So he's, mate, your name's not down. You're not coming in. Oi, no, mate. I've checked. You're not coming in. Oi, Frenchie, you're not coming in. You're not welcome here. Yeah, Slovaks, come in. Hungary, yeah, no worries. Jabba the Hutt, come in, mate. But you're not welcome. So that's what Steven Seagal's doing these days. And indeed, it's kind of worse than that. This is him. Jay and Kiev is less than kind to Steven Seagal, who has, if you remember, he's got a Russian passport now, and he's basically a Putin lover. An obese and visibly drugged Steven Seagal struggles to put a sentence together as he's used as a Kremlin propaganda prop to legitimize Putin. Exactly right there. Putin, likely now his only form of income after destroying his life and career. I'm very much looking forward to it, says Steven Seagal. Well, let's see what he has to say. I'll just pump up the volume to this to give you another musical reference there. Here we go.
I just said he's the greatest world leader. He's the greatest.
He's speaking very quietly. I just said he's the greatest world leader. He's the greatest.
What do you think the future will be like?
What do you think the future will be like?
President Putin, it will be the best.
With President Putin, he says, staggering, it will be the best. Great answer. It will be the best. Yeah. Greatest.
What do you tell Americans about Putin right now?
What do you tell Americans about Putin right now?
And his fifth term.
On his fifth term.
I'm very looking forward to it.
I'm very looking forward to it. Well done. What would you tell Americans? I'm very looking forward to it. Yeah, well done. Well done, Stephen. Good effort there, mate. Right. The reality on the ground, of course, is this is Crimea. Resonance shows what 10 years of Russian occupation and looting has done to Crimea. So you've got to remember, Crimea is a massively important summer vacation location. And you can read the subtitles to this. Everything, of course, is dilapidated. Now you could say that, hey, this is a selection bias. This person could be hunting out particularly dilapidated places, but this, I've got to say, it looks pretty standard. They have neglected to build lots of tourist infrastructure there, and instead favouring building trenches along the beach lines. The Crimean coastline, I guess, is not what it used to be. And of course, this was the sort of jewel of the Black Sea. Crimea was known, obviously, as a naval port, Sevastopol and whatnot, but this is one of your prime destinations for Russian holidaymakers. And yeah, it's not looking in a good way, because of course this is what liberation looks like, right? This is what holidays look like in a well-established resort town or resort holiday location. Right, Russia on fire here. So this is early. It seems early. In the Irkutsk region, there seems to be a lack of firefighters, says Tim White. In Bratsk, several streets and dachas completely burned down as wildfires advance unchecked. I think this is something to watch, right? So why is it something to watch? So a couple of years ago, the start of the war, we had the situation whereby there were huge wildfires. It's not rendering. Anyway, there were huge wildfires throughout Russia, and they went largely unchecked, or the Russians found it very difficult to fight them. And the reason was because during peacetime, the Russian conscripts are who are used, and the Russian army in general, to control wildfires. That's basically one of their jobs in the summer season. Well, if you are committing virtually every single troop you can to the front lines in Ukraine, and your conscripts that you aren't supposed to be allowed to send to Ukraine are sent to the border regions, or indeed sent to Ukraine, then you have a distinct lack of people to do this work, and so the fires went unchecked. It will be very interesting to see how these fires are dealt with during the fire season this year, and whether the Russians have the equipment, resources, manpower to be able to effectively deal with them. And of course, it'd be terribly sad if they can't from an ecological, environmental point of view. But the Russians are really making a rob for their own back here. On the other hand, they have done a good job, it seems, of fixing up the Tuapse oil refinery, as that's restarted after Ukraine attacked it in January. So the repair's taken 3 months. It is one of the largest refineries in Russia. So that is a major accomplishment for the Russians there. Again, the Ukrainians are going to be thinking, right, time to hit that bad boy. For the second time. So Russian oil and gas industry lacks nearly 40,000 employees due to war, according to Bloomberg. Situation was influenced by a significant demographic crisis in Russia, as well as high competition from the army and the Russian defense industry. Falling birth rates in the 1990s were the root cause, and the COVID-19 pandemic has added challenges. But the invasion of Ukraine has greatly exacerbated the problem, the publication writes. So that is a challenge for them to continue making the money that they have been in the past and producing as efficiently and effectively as possible in the hydrocarbon sector. Another, I guess, success for the Russians in terms of fixing stuff up. This is the Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol. As according to satellite imagery from yesterday, slight movement has been seen there. The repair bay is now empty of warships, with the Ivan Kurs moving to the frigate pier. So one of those ships that was previously hit, the Ivan Kurs, if you remember, is now appears to be fixed up. Second Krivak is now back at the frigate pier, along with an Alligator class ship. Finally, Cyclone, after coming to or leaving the pier. In other words, they are fixing up the ships that have been hit. Of course, it means those ships have been unusable and they will have lost crew as well. So we might expect more hits on Crimea, especially as the Ukrainians are working on attriting air defences, degrading the Russian air defence capabilities right across Crimea. That is happening regularly with those ATACMS strikes particularly. And then we come on finally to this. I thought this was pretty fascinating stuff. I'll show it to you on a big screen in a second. So, rare view inside the Ukrainian command bunker. This is one from the 225th Separate Assault Battalion. Note the dozen-plus drone streams running at the same time, with individual units live streaming drone feeds back to the post. I was lucky enough when I was in Ukraine with Greg and Zhenya to have access to some of these live feeds. So they know some commanders pretty well. And we got fed to our phones, well, to Greg's phone, not to my phone. Or no, actually it was to Zhenya's phone. We got to see some live feed drone attacks on several locations. And that was pretty incredible and quite a privilege. A little pause there for a good half an hour as the entire neighbourhood lost their internet. It seems to have just come back, fingers crossed. I don't have to travel to my in-laws to do the recordings today. So we're going to look inside this command and control bunker.
Отак і вісі красавчик, так заєбісь.
А то що прийшли туди? Там хлам повно.
Браво, подарок небі наблюдаємо.
Да, награды похожи. Ну, в зал пойду. Внимание, всем в укрытие.
Shows the importance of communications, things like Starlink, internet, intranet, all sorts of stuff going on that is vital for the functioning of an army now these days. And there you go. And also check that out. So that is a digital map there, as far as I understand it. So incredible tech that these guys have. Obviously, you're going to want the very best tech that you can have in order to get an advantage in a war, as it says here. Note the dozen plus drone streams with individuals' lives. Oh no, digital mapping. Yeah, that was a digital mapping table as well, which is, I think, pretty impressive. So anyway, that's a typical, well, is it a typical command bunker? Who knows? But it is certainly, I have seen ones that look pretty similar to that and variations thereof. That is a particularly large and clean one that I have seen. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Sorry, this one is about a good half an hour, 40 minutes delayed as a result of damned internet providers. Anyway, speak soon.